Well, welcome back, everybody, to 2024. Fabulous for Richie and I to be back here with another amazing guest. And welcome to the new year. And welcome, Michelle McEttrick, Chief Customer Officer of Primark.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, it's fabulous to have you here because I think many people listening will know you've had a brilliant marketing career. And I think there's going to be lots that people can learn from your experiences. And I was thinking, when Michelle talks, people listen, is what came to mind when I was reflecting on some of the things I've experienced of you talking in public. But you have had a delicious cocktail career. I didn't know all of this, actually, when I did a bit of research. So you've moved around quite a lot. So you started at McCann Ericson for, I think, about 8 years, and time in BBDO in Portugal. Then a bit of time as a consultant, then client side, then in startup, then back to BBH agency side, back to client side at Barclays, Tesco for 6 years, which is probably where, from my perspective anyway, in the UK, particularly, probably most famous, world's largest grocery business. And I know there was a massive trust rebuild job to be done there. And then more recently at CCO at Primark, just over a year now. And we will get into that. But what else can I say? I mean, you've been in Campaign and Marketing Week, top 100 marketers, more time as you can shake a stick at. You're a fellow of the Marketing Society and, of course, a long-standing member and contributor to WACL. But I'm going to go back to what I said at the top. When Michelle talks, people listen. So I'm really interested to get into the nuts and bolts of how you've done what you've done, all the amazing things you've achieved. And so I'm going to pass over to Richie in a moment, but just thank you for coming on the show, Michelle.
Oh, well, thank you so much for inviting me, Mark. And I just love the ethos of this podcast and why you do it. And that is to make sure that these career successes don't look as shiny as they appear, and really to get behind some of the things that people have learned on the way to the positions that they're in today.
Well, Michelle, thank you once again from me. It's such an absolute pleasure. And of course, you're the first guest of 2024. So that's an amazing sort of, absolutely. So tell me, did you get a bit of downtime during December, or family time, or was it, working through? What was it like?
Oh, actually, I did take a good break, which is, I think is really, really important. And the last, I'll just share with you, over New Year's, my husband, Mike, and I went to Devon for a 5-day sort of like detox, hiking with a Army drill sergeant guy, lots of yoga, intention setting, and most importantly, it was a digital detox. And so I feel so energized and ready for 2024, having taken that time.
Sounds amazing. And you might know what I'm going to go on to say, because I've mentioned it before in something you did with the Pablo folks. But I remember I talked to you between Tesco and Primark, and you mentioned about how you'd been running hot and how you were in the process of cooling your jets, which I love that expression.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this was another moment. And so I suppose my question is, and this links to something Richie and I have been discussing on, is 2024 the year when people finally kind of get their shit together and get the balance right? But from your perspective, is this a regular thing you do to kind of reset and take stock?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can't help anyone else if you can't help yourself. And I think that one of the things that anyone in a leadership position learns pretty quickly is that it requires a lot of energy to think about what your team needs to deliver, and then not only remove barriers, but help to keep them motivated. And if you find yourself in a depleted zone, that's really, really difficult to do.
Michelle, one of the things you just talked through, and the phrase that you used was intention setting, as you did that sort of 5-day detox. And I find that quite interesting, and maybe relating it back to some of those key pivotal moments in your career. Has it always been quite intentional in nature when you're making those sorts of moves? Or how would you say you've categorized your career journey in that sense?
That is such a great question, Richie. And I guess the first thing I will say is anyone who tells you that they're career is a straight line that they planned when they were 22 might not be telling the truth. At least I haven't come across anyone for whom that is true. And so I have a fantastic post-rationalization that I developed really early in my career, which is I don't actually set 5-year, 10-year goals in terms of what I want to be called or the position that I want to be in. And I feel like that is because if I say I want to be X in the next 5 years, that will make me so focused on cutting off options to get there that I wouldn't have any opportunity to be in some of the exciting places that I've found myself in. Now, again, that is post-rationalization. And one of the things that the flip side of that is that I will say I do really enjoy keeping options open in order to evaluate new information along the path of my career. The one thing that's been very consistent for me is not wanting to be put in a box and to be pigeonholed. And so, Mark, you talked about a delicious cocktail of a career, and that has been intentional, actually. So I think in particular, leaving Barclays and not wanting to get pigeonholed into financial services, leaving Tesco and not want to get pigeonholed into grocery, it's been really important to me in my career. I've always looked to take what I have, the experiences that I have had, the things that I've learned in my past jobs, and trade that for learning things that I don't know anything about.
Love that. And I love the fact that you comfortably hold the fact that there's a shiny, post-rationalized, linear explanation of what is a bit like the swan, isn't it? Under the water. Of course, the reality just isn't that. And that's central to this podcast. But it's clear you don't like to be put in a box.
Mm.
Where do you think that comes from?
Oh, that's a great question. One of the questions that I thought you might ask would be, how has your early years, childhood, etc., influenced your career? And when I thought about that, I was thinking about the fact that my mom was a Montessori teacher, and my stepdad built houses for a living. And so I never had what you might call sort of professional role models in my developing years. And so I think that allowed me to face the transition between education and working, it in a bit of a naive way, but also with a lot of curiosity. And so I am someone who really enjoys new experiences and probably just didn't realize that isn't something that would be normal, that you would be able to do. And also it just so happens that has kept me really engaged and curious in every new job that I take, because it is 50-50 what I'm bringing and what I'm learning. And for me, that's a real rush of when I find when I'm learning something completely new, that's when my synapses are firing faster. Everything's being stretched, and that is such a great feeling.
Michelle, thanks for sharing that. And I love the thought of that 50-50, bringing and learning. That's such a lovely turn of phrase and way to kind of think about sort of future career moves. But interestingly, maybe we've had a slightly interesting sort of connected path in that sense, because my parents too hadn't come from professional backgrounds.
Yeah.
And what I've found as I've sort of meandered through both my career, but speaking to young people today, is that also has the yin and the yang of sometimes being a bit more lost and having a lack of inspiration or role models in your life, which then you only know what you know. And so I just wondered to what extent, what inspires you or what inspired you to then forge a professional-based career. Keeping in mind, of course, you talked about the role of curiosity, but there must have been sort of points in your life which guided you to get to where, to land in a position where you were able to, sort of kind of kick off into a professional career.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can be inspired in an adjacent way. So I wouldn't say that my parents were not inspiring. They just didn't point the path and the exact steps that you would take to go into more of a professional career. To answer your question, I have been so fortunate in my career to be the beneficiary of more senior people who were extremely generous with their time and the things that they knew. And so I would point to probably my the two mentors that I've had since the early 90s are Tiana Oppenheimer, who is, she was the UK chief executive at Barclays, but originally she was my client back when I was at McCann Ericson. And then David Weldon, who I'm sure this audience knows very well, who was also my client when I was at McCann Ericson. So I saw people who I admired and respected more for the way they did things and their intellect than the height of success they had achieved. And so I was able to then sort of follow after that and see how close could I get to that kind of way of being.
Great mentors, not least David, who's been on the show, and I think obviously he's OBE or CBE or MBE or something. He's great guy. Interesting. I can now see a link between the generosity that you've experienced from your managers and mentors, and what I hear of you, particularly in your Tesco time, which was that you were a very well respected and liked boss. And that links back to what you said at the beginning about needing energy to putting energy into the team. So let's talk a bit about team, because you said at both Tesco and Primark, but team as being critical to your success. So what's Michelle's perspective on leading teams?
I aim to be to really exemplify service leadership. I think it's just a real easy math equation that the leader of the team is only one person. So that leader can only achieve what one person can achieve. And so if I feel as though it's all about me, then that's all I will get done. And if I feel that my success is entirely dependent on the success of the team that I'm leading, then I have to think more about what they need and less about what I need. I think the other thing is, if you think about sort of early in your career, for me at least, one of the first things I learned is that you get promoted out of doing what you're good at. And so that taught me to make sure that I'm really clear about the difference between what I need to do as a leader versus trying to do the jobs of the people who report to me.
Wow, I love that mathematical equation that you bring to it, and you're absolutely so right. It's a multiplication effect if you are able to get your team behind you. I really want to turn the conversation a little bit to Primark, because of course, you can't walk a UK high street today without seeing a plethora of Primark bags. What's it like to work there? What's it been for you over the last year?
Primark is an amazing business, and I'll tell you the main reason I joined is that when I started speaking to Primark and to Paul Marchant, our CEO and my boss, I learned so much about the business that is completely unknown to the millions of people who you see carrying bags, not only in the UK, but across 16 markets globally. And all of the things that I learned are really interesting and positive about the brand. And so it's one of those situations that is almost the flip side of my experience at Tesco. When I joined Tesco, we intentionally didn't communicate for a long time because we didn't have a lot of the solid things that we would want to communicate. We would have risked being in a position of talking the talk as opposed to walking the walk. Primark is a business and a culture that is walking the walk. The culture is extremely people-focused. And for me, in a retail or service business where the colleagues are such an important part of the brand experience, it's critical that you have a focus on them and you really think hard about people, and Primark does that. And then I think the second thing is Primark is absolutely in a leadership position, having established over 10 years ago a lot of the foundational sustainability and ethics programs that they have in place today. So whether it's the Primark Sustainable Cotton Program, which has trained just under 300,000 smallholding cotton farmers in India, 80% of whom are women, on more sustainable cotton farming that is now the pipeline for cotton into Primark product, or the sustainable ethics team who was in the field and auditing every single factory in person every year. These are things that are not known because they're not aligned completely with the industry. And so they're big, huge opportunities to really build more of the richness of the brand in customers' minds.
I mean, that's a massive who knew, because
Yeah.
So it shows the upside possibility. I want to ask two questions now.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's go one at a time. On sustainability, I got a little bit sort of dismayed during 2023 because it seemed like the sustainability conversation got a little bit eclipsed by everything else that's going on in the world.
Yeah.
A bit of a backward step where it had a good bump post-pandemic. I mean, where is it? Is it becoming ever more important in consumers' decision making? Is that happening quite slowly? I'm just trying to get a sense from somebody who's right in the heart of it.
Yeah.
Where's the sustainability conversation going?
I mean, I think that it's no different than anything else. People absolutely need to meet their fundamental needs before they can think about anything else. And so when we're in a cost of living crisis, when crime is on the rise, there are so many environmental factors that feel like a threat to that. It's difficult for customers to also prioritize things that they might like to. The position that Primark takes has always been, in the 54 years since it was founded in Dublin, 1969, that you shouldn't have to pay more for fashion and to look good and to feel good. And evermore, feeling good includes being able to make a sustainable choice. And so, you shouldn't have to pay more for that either. But to answer your broader question, how are people changing their behaviors? A very small percentage of people are changing their behaviors and, will lead the way. But as with anything, Mark, and this will be in your experience too, across your career, people don't really care what you can do. So talking about sustainability, talking about ethics, talking about all of these things, it's just going to blow right past customers. They want to know what you can do for them. And so how can you connect the things that you're doing on any front, whether it's making things more affordable or more sustainable or more ethical, and really connect it back to their choices and how that helps them. And that's a lot of what we're doing at Primark right now.
Makes perfect sense. Richie, I'm going to jump in just because I'm going to steal the time for the second question. No, that's a great answer, and I remain optimistic that things will change over time. But the other thing you said was really interesting, was very culture focused, and a lot of people say that, but I'm going to flip the question around. So for people who are looking for their next role and they want to go somewhere which is genuinely culture focused, from what you know of Primark, what should people be looking for? What are the signals which show that that's wholesome and true?
Well, I can only tell you my experience in joining Primark, and it was very evident to me in the interview process. And one of the ways that was evident was the really thinking about introducing a new role into the organization. So a chief customer officer role is brand new to Primark, and it's entirely down to, the wisdom of Paul Marchant, really thinking on a continual basis. Here we've taken a next step of growth. What capabilities do we need to strengthen and build? And so he determined that Customer-Centricity brand were the next on the list. And yet that is something that is quite different for the culture. And so what I watched him do in terms of announcing and keeping under wraps the concept of the role, but then the way he announced it and the care he took to take really important stakeholders, in particular my direct reports, through this, just demonstrated very, very clearly how important everyone on the team feeling really motivated as opposed to deflated, which is a possibility. We're doing something new, which means everything that we've done before is not good. He managed to land that magic trick of making people really understand that this is an additive thing. And that just spoke volumes to me.
Yeah.
That's wonderful there. Thank you for that. Customer centricity brand, and as you say, bringing people on board when new things are happening. Seems some things you there mentioned. And it was interesting, Michelle, when I was going through my research, I couldn't help but walk into a Primark store.
Yeah.
I live in London, and I noticed that you had a sort of a new part of the store, which was click and collect. And I was quite interested by that, because clearly, during the pandemic, there was lots of headlines around Primark and around e-commerce and D2C, and a lot of the industry that you're talking against, perhaps fighting against, has gone down that road. And I think Primark has stayed clear of that sort of e-commerce sort of space to a large extent in more favor of click and collect. Is that to do with customer centricity as well?
It is, because Primark is very proudly a value retailer and firmly focused on physical stores being the best way to buy clothing, because you can see it, you can feel it, you can try it on, you can determine if it's right for you or not. And the click and collect offer, which is very much in trial still, is really thinking about how can our digital activities and the digital team at Primark really enhance that in-store experience. And one way it can enhance it is to offer you the option to either select from a wider range of clothing than is available at your local smaller store, potentially, or also to be able to plan in advance for your shopping trip and be able to pick it up, take a look at it, and then bring it home.
Wonderful. Makes sense. Makes complete sense. 2024.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning. Excited to look ahead. Well, so in fact, yeah, what's maybe the one big thing you're excited for 2024? before. I was going to ask about sort of themes, trends, memes, but actually, what are you really excited about for 2024?
For 2024, I'm really excited to build on the momentum from 2023. So I think this is really relevant to some of the themes that you guys talk about. The first year in a new role at a senior position is a lot about building. And so we've put a lot of foundations in place. I have an excellent leadership team. And so now we're ready to really put fuel in that engine. And so that's what I'm looking forward to, is for customers to start seeing what we've been working on.
Wow, that sounds great.
Yeah.
I want to come back to the colleague point, because, we talk about the sort of the culture of Primark, and Mark sort of alluded to it in some respects, where there'd be lots of people looking to get into organizations such as this. What would be the kind of characteristics, skills, capabilities that you'd be looking for, or advise the next generation coming through to hone in on when trying to forge a successful marketing career?
Yeah, I think if there's a trend that is constant, even though it's sort of parading around in different outfits at different times, it is that the specialisms needed to create and nurture great brands and to market them effectively change constantly. Mm-hmm. So I would recommend personally that you focus on not being a generative AI expert, but recognize that over your career, you're going to need to demonstrate flexibility and the ability to learn and be interested in new things as they develop. And I think AI is the perfect example of that, because in a 3-week period, it will be completely different. Yeah. And so if anyone focuses on exclusively mastering today without recognizing that what they need to be doing is be curious about today, and then be able to understand how things are changing and be curious when they change, I think it could really frustrate people.
You're so true. My daughter works in digital marketing, and we were having this conversation about the career of the prompter, the AI prompter. And we realized that was going to have a very short shelf life, because she'd already worked out how she could do that for herself and start to automate big chunks of her role. And so I think that as a career probably had, literally about a 3-week shelf life. Anyway, so you mentioned the 5-day digital detox. I probably didn't quite go as far as that over Christmas, but anyway. But I mean, your inherently your role, the types of roles that you've done that many do, there's a level of stress and complexity and pace and, as you said, requirement for energy. So how do you build, what good habits do you have? So maybe that digital detox isn't the only thing you do. I'm sure there's other things you do. What do you do to manage all of that maelstrom?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. And do I manage it? I don't know. That's true. I think it's the biggest thing I will say is being aware of it.
Yeah.
And so whether I am able to achieve balance at all times or not is less important than knowing that it's important and that I strive for it. So, I could bore you, and if you did talk to anyone who worked for me at Tesco, they would love to tell you all kinds of stories about the crazy stuff I get up to in my morning routine, which is ranging from different yoga things to, 1.5 liters of warm lemon water. I mean, I guess the thing for me is it's focusing on striving for balance, and some of the things that help me do that come and some of them go. I guess I would definitely point to the fact that I am fortunate enough to be in an extremely supportive and loving marriage. So my partner in crime is my husband, Mike. And having people, whether it's your partner, or family, or friends, who you can really rely on and touch base with on a routine basis is always, always really positive for me.
Love that.
100%. I think that, forging great relationships really are the pinnacle for successful careers and what gets really built on. We're probably approaching the end of the segment now, Michelle. So maybe the penultimate question. And I want to come back to the smorgasbord of your career and the time that you've spent both in client and agency side. And I wonder if that's something that you would recommend anybody do, spending a balance of their career, both sides of that coin, in order to forge a more wholesome and holistic view of the sort of the marketing tools and techniques around. Is that something that you've enjoyed as a consequence?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, again, it's not something that I planned necessarily. In all honesty, after about 9 years, agency side got a bit tired of it. And that was right at the beginning of the first .com boom. And I thought, I'd really like to see if I can't leverage some of this big blue chip experience I've had agency side into being able to understand more about what an internet business is like. And so that was my first flip from agency into client. And then after probably about 7 years on client side jobs, I felt I had so much that I had learned that I could apply to an agency side role. And that's when I went and joined BBH in London. So for me, it was really one of those like, oh God, I've learned a ton of stuff and I know it would be relevant and interesting here. So let me go try it. However, the result of that, as you say, Richie, is you do get different perspectives. Both are enjoyable for different reasons. Great people on both sides. So, I have enjoyed it. I think it can be something that is really enriching and rewarding in a career.
And indeed delivers a delicious cocktail. So, so last question. It's been fabulous talking to you, Michelle. Last question. If you had a magic wand, what would you do with that for anything in the world? So I'm very, very broad. What would the magic wand give for you?
I would wave a magic wand to see a pendulum swing away from fear and towards kindness.
Please say more, because that's a lovely thought.
I feel like when you turn on the news, there's a lot of fear-based behavior and protectionism, that like coming into yourself. Others are scary. People like me are safe. And that goes against all of the things that we know that we've learned in our careers about the benefit of being inclusive in order to get diverse opinions and points of view. And it just feels like a lot of the things that are happening right now are insular as opposed to inclusive. And it doesn't feel like a recipe for progress or success.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, you're welcome.
What a wonderful sort of sentiment to end on. So thank you, Michelle. It's been such an amazing, insightful half an hour spent with you on some of these key topics. And I get the pleasure of just trying to summarize some of these key themes that you've taken away. So here goes. And I've got pages full as well of notes. So there we are through that process. I love the way that you start 2024, 5-day detox. You talked about a military sergeant giving you the orders over the holidays as well. But of course, that sets the scene for what is some amazing intention setting in 2024. And of course, I think, you talked about the role of intention, although more perhaps post-rationalization, And in fact, maybe the intent is to not limit off and cut off your options in order to be more intentional about keeping an open field as to determining where things can be. And as part of that, what a great smorgasbord for your career you've had, not to be put in a box through and through. And your ability to kind of jump from agency, client, and different sectors has been really remarkable. In fact, I thought it was quite interesting because what most people would term as to be quite a difficult lift-off moment into a professional mode, I actually think that you embraced it wholeheartedly and been truly inspired, as the way you termed it, in an adjacent way, as you started and forged your career. And I would actually sort of recommend that anybody who's at the outset of their careers who may not, to think about it in that adjacent way as well, to see where you can forge those inspirations and go through it with the way that you term naivety and curiosity at the same time. I loved your sentiment when you talked about the 50-50 to your career, where you bring 50%, and it's all about learning 50% along the way as well. And in fact, this is exactly where you sit today, because you felt the huge learning opportunity that you had in front of you, that openness that you shared when you were being interviewed by Paul Merchant, and the way that you were able to get into Primark was all in around your ability to bring that 50-50 rule really playing out. I love the thought when you said, and big shout out to David Weldon, OBE. What a wonderful man, but a great mentor to you. And he's been pivotal, I think, to all of us in different ways throughout the years. And I'm sure many more listening in here today. So thanks, David. Team criticality. You talked about leading teams, service leadership. You're just one person, but the multiplication effect really can come true. And that's where you need to get to when thinking about your team. How can you serve them better in order for them to be more productive in what they need to do? You talked about the way that in a very enthused way about Primark and what a great space and place, and imparted some great initiatives such as the Sustainable Cotton Program with farmers predominantly based in India, and the becoming a real leader in the sustainable and ethics that they're trying to engender. I love the ethos when you talked about consumers, and it's all about being able to sort of what's in it for them, and you need to be able to connect the dots as a true marketer, true customer-centric marketer, between sort of what's in it for them to connect them to the consumer, as well as the initiatives that you're driving and bringing that sustainable choice, which goes back to the heart of what Primark is all about, which is all about, you shouldn't have to pay more for being fashionable. And that does include sustainability within that choice as well. We talked a bit about culture and what makes great culture, and as part of that when looking for next roles as well. And of course, some great insights in around click and collect. I could go on and on and on, but it's just, the energy, the momentum, the way that you manage it, to be aware of it, to get that striving for balance. And of course, the way that you ended on that magic wand, fear over less fear, more kindness in the world today is what we all need. So I hope I've done the sentiment a bit of justice there, Michelle.
Wow, Richie. I mean, that was pretty good.
Hey,
I think you've done this a few times.
Maybe just a wee bit. But beyond that, it just was an absolute treasure to have you with us. And thank you genuinely for your time. And I'm sure many people will benefit from this.
100%.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Michelle.